So I wanted to just read three reasonably short texts. As I've already said, democracy is one of the roots of this place, very, very fundamentally. Dignity is another. The dignity not just of a building, but of a town and its people, a borough of 260,000 people who have lost dignity for a very long time, who've lost hope, and I would hope that galleries begin to do something about that in some way. And then difference, that it's always intended this place was a bit different to other places, not least in its role in civic life, because this is a civic building as much as it is an art building. So I'd like to take you back to the first art gallery opening 133 years ago. And within this report from the Walsall Observer is the speech of the Mayor of Walsall, which has always inspired me. And yes, it comes from that municipalist, high Victorian vision, slightly top down, but I hope you'll agree with me that it is so important for now. So here we are, the 21st of May, 1892. On Monday afternoon, the Walsall Art Gallery and Museum was formally opened by His Worship the Mayor, Alderman Brownhill, in the presence of a brilliant assembly. The museum has been fitted up in what was formerly the lending department of the Free Library, a room well suited to the purpose both from its shape and system of lighting. Under the direction of the Free Library Committee, under the chairmanship of Councillor Beardsley, the room has been conveniently fitted and arranged, the actual work placing in position the various works of art being carried out by Councillor Hughes, to whose skill and judgment much praise must be given. In the centre of the room are placed the handsome cases of art treasures sent from South Kensington, which include metalwork, textile productions, antique musical instruments, and other choice articles. On several sides of the room are fixed are glass cases in which are displayed selected specimens from the collection of New Guinea curiosities lent by Mr. Dauncey. These have a double interest to Walsall people, inasmuch as they have been gathered by the Reverend Dauncey, who is working in that country as a missionary, and the collection probably unique in its perfection. Indeed, it is said by missionaries who have laboured there to be the finest collection in the world. On the staircase are placed the many beautiful fossils which have been lent by Mr. A. Burt, and in other rooms are the missal illuminations sent by South Kensington, the curiosities given to the town some time since by the Reverend Harry Scott. And we go on to medal and coin collections, birds' eggs, paintings. But then we come to the speech of the Mayor. And as I say, this has always inspired me. The Mayor said that he was very pleased to see so many ladies and gentlemen present. They could not hope to emulate the old historic glories of Italy in superb masterpieces in Walsall, at all events at present, but what they hoped to surpass them in was a combined effort for amusing and making happier the most humble member of the community. Applause. There had been a very great development in municipalities since the times of 50 or 60 years ago, especially in the character of their work. Then they thought that they had done their duty in the good old times, when they had made a pretty free use of the jail and the workhouse, when they had maintained law and order and prevented people dying from starvation. In these days, and especially during the last 20 years, they considered that it was incumbent upon them to look after the popular culture of the masses, and he thought he could say that during the last 20 years that idea had revealed itself in free libraries, loan exhibitions and similar means throughout the country on a greater scale than had ever been known before. That was the greatest step. They had looked after the material benefit of their fellow burgesses for many years. For instance, they had established gasworks of great profit to the ratepayers. They had drained and cleaned the town pretty well and established many sanitary improvements, making houses of the people better to live in by not allowing houses to be built or remain which were not fit to live in. They had established parks and recreation grounds where people could delight themselves and where their health could be improved, and they were about to build splendid baths so that the poorest might have as good accommodation as the richest. Having looked after the health of the people and their material benefit, they had looked after the improvement of their minds by the establishment of educational institutions. During the last few months, a school for technical education had been opened and was attended by over 100 boys. If any of them visited that place, they would find 50 young chemists who could go well through their work. They've established not the community, not the corporation, but the community at large, free education so that everyone could be educated. They were pleased to recognise, too, the cheap lectures which the people had had. Applause. And he looked forward to in the not too far distant future to the time when they would have cheap and splendid concerts in their brand new public hall. Then there was their Science and Art Institute, which was a great place for instruction. They wanted to be happy, and he thought a good art gallery was a step towards making life happier. Many of them could go to Birmingham and other places and see the splendid collections there, but there were the toiling thousands who could not do so, and they thought that they should bring some of the masterpieces to the doors of such in order to meet the wants of the very poorest. Applause. Certainly the sanitary improvements have made life longer, and they could not do better than make life better worth living. More applause. If the art galleries were successful in its purpose, they would see that the manners of the people would become softer and less uncouth than they were at present, for they could not see pictures and mix with others as they would do in that room without being cheered and instructed and lifted to a higher level. In Walsall, they had to rest on their own efforts and to cultivate the virtue of self-help. Birmingham was a grand example of what had been done by the people. But in the last 20 years, they have been greatly helped by about £1.5 million of money given to them by large-hearted rich people. In Walsall, they could not hope for such things, and if they could not get them from those who had a superabundance of wealth, then they would get them for themselves. Hear, hear. He had a very great pleasure in declaring the art gallery open for the use of the inhabitants of the borough. Applause. The second text I wanted to read is from a period when the old gallery closed and the new one opened, and suddenly there was no art anywhere to be seen. So with curators Smith and Fowle, they chose the town and wider borough as the art gallery and worked with artists throughout. And this is a short text about that. And here we come straight back to Peter St. John. We are interested in urbanism that responds to real situations, that is to do with spaces of democracy and difference, and with the inherently loose and broken character of English urban fabric. Cruiser St. John Architects. Cruiser St. John's intention in designing the new art gallery Walsall to explore spaces of democracy and difference was a proposition that was shared by all of us working on this astonishing 10-year project. In creating the gallery, we hope not only to achieve a beautiful object of architecture and exquisite places for the presentation of art, but also to achieve close connections between the gallery and the everyday life of the town, provoking long-term conversations with local people about the place of art and artists in this 21st century black country community. This is where To Be Continued, the title of the art programme, began. When we had to close the old gallery 1 year in advance of opening the new one in order to allow for the safe transfer of the art collections and other resources, we faced an unavoidable pause in the exhibition artists project programmes that sought over time to engage local people in the world of ideas. In commissioning Smith and Fowle as curators of an art programme, we hope to enable the continuation of the presence in Walsall of art and artists. Looking at the town and its public spaces today, it could not by any stretch of the imagination be called pretty or picturesque. Its centre shares with those of many other British towns and cities the same shopping malls and chain stores, the same haphazardly arranged red and grey brick paving, faux Victorian streetlights, perfunctory planting schemes and street furniture. There can be no question but that the distinctiveness and individuality of our urban centres has been eroded by a generation of retail mauling, not to mention unimaginative and lazy civic planning, which is slowly being challenged, not least by a wave of world-class and often lottery-funded public projects, including the gallery in Walsall and a few more enlightened urban developments. These are reintroducing questions about the municipal and the civic, as well as the proper role of culture in reimagining the future of communities. These urban projects reconnect to previous periods of invention and renewal, most particularly the zealous high Victorian municipal campaigns in the vibrant, fast-growing industrial towns and cities of the Midlands and the North. It is hard to imagine that contemporary Walsall with its ordinariness or averageness, was once a place with a highly developed sense of its own importance in the world, and with a deep sense of pride that like the neighbouring Black Country coal seam, runs just below the poisoned abraded surface. Old photographs of the town hall, the ground at Her Majesty's Theatres in Park Street, the Art College, the courthouse, the public squares at the Bridge and Bradford Place, the hotels, pubs and cinemas, and the ever-bustling market area sweeping up to the hill to St Matthew's Church that Stephen referred to earlier, indicate a confident and active town centre. It was and is a place used not only for shopping, but also for meetings and demonstrations, celebrations and displays, doing business, learning, justice, worship, cultural endeavour, entertainment and surprising spectacle. With Buffalo Bill performing in the Arboretum and even garishly adorned elephants slowly ambling through the crowds in Park Street just behind us. All of this rich inheritance, as well as the very physical reality of the construction of the gallery, provided the context for the artist in To Be Continued. Smith and Fowle proposed that the town and its people would be the inspiration and material for the artists invited to take part. They would be encouraged to take a wander, to have a chat, to sniff around a bit, finding niches and interesting vantage points, looking in the cracks. The enthusiasm with which local people and the press engaged with the project as sponsors, helpers and participants, as well as audiences, indicates how ready they were to engage in a conversation about public space, attesting to the quality and generosity of the artists involved. To Be Continued proceeded with a loose and flexible structure that was particularly open and responsive to the ideas generated by artists, focusing on short-term, temporary interventions into the life of the town, rather than pursuing the ambiguous benefits of permanence. Given the horror of much public art produced in British streets and squares in the last 20 years, I would recommend that this more discursive and democratic approach be more broadly and more often adopted. And finally, a very short text in the book of the project, published by Bats, which is available in the library. And this one is Getting Under Walsall's Skin. The story has to start with a few words about Walsall, a predominantly industrial community of 263,000 people just north of Birmingham, located on the eastern edge of the legendary ugly Black Country. Walsall remains a significant centre for engineering and leather goods manufacturing. I started work here in 1989 as head of museums and galleries. As the team gradually grew, we established its reputation as being consistently lively and pioneering, exploring new ways of working with historic collections, developing exhibition, education and interpretation programs, renegotiating the complex territories of social connectedness, cultural diversity and curatorial strategies. Underpinning all of this was a philosophy that stresses the central and critical role that local people play in the representation and questioning of culture and cultures. While the art world was slow to understand this philosophy and some of our work was unfunded for many years, the audience at our gallery grew to be one of the most diverse and active in the country. After 10 years in the planning and 3 long and hard years of construction, the new art gallery opened its automatic doors to the public on the 16th of February 2000, and at that moment our dreams became reality. A few days later, staff were looking back nostalgically to the days before visitors arrived, dropping rubbish, leaving marks, asking questions, complaining, touching the art, losing an unbelievable assortment of objects. And yet, of course, without the visitors and their demands and concerns, it would not be an art gallery. We were simultaneously enthused, exhilarated, elated, and deeply moved by the range as well as the number of people who flocked through the doors. This hot and messy scrum of visitors experiencing the building, but also experiencing each other's presence in free public space, is exactly what we imagined when we set out to plan a gallery that would be unapologetically world-class, yet accessible to all, a democratic space of the highest quality and a focus for community life. From its inception, the brief for the gallery was that it should represent excellence, the very best in terms of art, architecture and public space, rejecting the sad British tradition of cutting corners, compromising, of making do and getting by in public projects. Equally, we wanted the gallery to be a model of accessibility, enabling people from across the social spectrum to engage with and participate in the arts, making strong, long-term relationships between audiences, artists and children. Also from its inception, admission to the gallery was planned proudly and passionately to be free. We set out to prove that the belief that excellence and access were mutually incompatible was a false and cynical prejudice. Starting with a derelict site, a muddy, unsurfaced car park on the top of Walsall's main shopping street, a series of complicated processes began. These involved massive public consultation, the slow building of political and community consensus, the engagement of support from national agencies and from individuals, master planning and refining the brief, and then, in 1995, an international architectural ideas competition. The intention was not to find a final design, but an architectural practice that the gallery team could work with. We wanted the competition to make a space for young and lesser-known practices, and it was a fantastic experience that allowed extraordinary conversations about what an art gallery for the 21st century might be. From 73 entrants from all over Europe, we selected 6 practices. Among them was MUF, the Artists and Architects Collaborative. They proposed a gallery with a 24-hour bar cafe, a tattoo parlour, a laundrette, and artist allotments on the roof. You would be able to come along, throw your laundry into a washing machine, see a show, meet a friend for a coffee, or tend to the gardening. In the end, as we know, we chose the London-based practice Cruiser St John. They had not designed a gallery before, and their largest completed building at that time cost £500,000. It was some kind of leap of faith to award them a contract for a £21 million art gallery, but we were totally persuaded by their ideas, their responsiveness to the brief, to Walsall, and to the rehousing of the Garden Rhine collection. They were passionate and could talk intelligently about art, especially contemporary art. They proposed a tall gallery of many different spaces, describing it as being like a big house, to be explored and discovered by visitors as they moved between the floors. It would be a gallery with many windows, varying in scale from the domestic to the cinemascopic, flooding the gallery with light, but also, and critically, allowing views out, as we saw earlier, out of the gallery to the town and the region beyond. Many of the architects in the competition have been sniffy about a gallery located next to Woolworths and BHS, now sadly gone. Proposed schemes that turned their back on this retail reality. They turned their back on the town. Like Cruiser St John, Cruiser St John celebrated the fact that you could pop into both store and gallery for a bit of pick and mix, and that the gallery could be a part of everyday life, connected and real. After 5 years of work, the result is a 37-metre-high tower clad in pale terracotta tiles, punctuated by many windows that hang like picture frames on the terracotta. Inside, visitors started a generous reception space and explore a building, as we've seen, of astonishing quality, built to last. More than 5,000 people of all ages and from all backgrounds toured the site during construction. Schools were involved in hundreds of projects, writing, dance and drama, tours, talks, workshops, artist commissions, competitions. During the launch period, this energetic public involvement was continued with artists and schools making shop window displays in 20 stores, while buses brought people from outlying areas to the gallery with linked discounts in local shops. While all of these events and happenings are being planned by the gallery, what has amazed us is that people of all kinds are requesting to use the place for their own purposes: jazz and symphony concerts, club nights, dance performances, fashion shows, opera, press conferences, abseiling events for charity, fire brigade emergency training, and so on. And people use it in the ways visitors have always used galleries: as a meeting place, a place to show off, as a pick-up joint. The gallery is being used as a civic building full of community life and aspiration and communication. In fact, the building is performing almost like a town in its own right, with the citizens visibly exercising their right to participate in the life of the community and in the story of art and architecture. I don't know why this celebration of civic space should be happening now, but I think it has something to do with the disappearing public realm, the fact that we've gone through a profoundly anti-democratic period, with increasing privatisation and control of public space, the ghettoisation of communities and their experiences. Our Prime Minister, some of you remember, who said there was no such thing as society. Well, there is, and people want to be part of it. For generations, the people of Walsall have been expected to accept second or third best. They know what quality is. but they have also learnt not to ask for too much for fear of disappointment. The most powerful justification of every single penny of the £21 million that has been spent on the creation of the new art gallery Walsall is the powerful impact it has on the hearts and minds of local people. That's me done. Thank you very much.
And I'd first of all like to say thanks to Peter Jenkinson. Peter, you are somebody who has always used your incredibly great talents to represent other people, and you've been a real inspiration.
Thank you, and the same back. And it was a massive team effort, as you guys said.
And I'd like to thank Matt and Michael for organising this very nice event. I have to say the enthusiasm for this building has been wonderfully encouraging. And then I'd like to say a few other things. Of course, I'm not the one to talk about the programme at the Art Gallery or its outreach, or about the responsibilities for running this building. And I would like to congratulate Stephen Snoddy and Deborah Robinson and their teams for shouldering that responsibility. I know that Deborah's been here all that time and Stephen's been here almost all of that time. And I'd like to congratulate them and Walsall Council for continuing to run this gallery, to congratulate them on the visitor numbers that they still have. It's clearly providing a great service for local people, for local artists, for visitors from beyond, for the region. But I have to say that's not really for me to talk about. I understand that the majority of you are architects, and Matt and Michael asked me to say something about what it was like as a young architect to start on this competition. I think there are some students here, which is nice, and perhaps something of how it was different then than it is now. And I'll talk a little bit about the gallery and a little bit about things we're doing now, very briefly, if there's time. When we started in practice, I would say that teaching is very important. We had part-time teaching positions, and we were using our teaching as research. So we were working with our students on projects that we devised in order to explore ideas that we found interesting. We were doing our own research, our own visits with students. Teaching was very important, and we started with absolutely nothing, supporting ourselves with this modest teaching income, doing competitions full-time for 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 competitions a year, as well as a few very modest commissions. We designed a Citizens Advice Bureau in an old industrial building, an extension to a doctor's surgery, and we designed this tiny little house for my wife's aunt and her husband, which cost £100,000. This is all that we had done before we did the art gallery. When we looked at the competition for the art gallery, and we're talking about 30 years ago. I mean, some of you weren't even born then. It's like looking back at one. It's like you lot looking back at your childhood. First of all, there was an incredibly inspiring text in the brief talking about things that at that time were not talked about very much. Talking about access, disabled access, but also the wider access and free access to museums, talking about the importance of education in art galleries, talking about the importance that the regions should receive access to the highest quality of galleries and museums, just like London, because you have to remember that Tate Modern was under construction at that time, a £150 million project. The text was very inspiring. These are things that now are totally general and normal in discussions about art institutions, but at that time it was totally new. That was very exciting. I did then come to the site, and this is what it looked like at that time. It was totally flattened. There was no canal basin. It was a bit shocking, but we knew that there was a European money coming to the town that was going to be developing this west end of Walsall, where the high street meets the kind of wider industrial estate of the Black Country, and there was the sense of these roads converging roughly at the site, and the canal converging at the site, and the idea we had was to build a tower there that would be a beacon at the end of the high street, at the confluence of these roads, acting as it were as a kind of gate to the entrance to the town. We were also conscious that Walsall had very little investment in public buildings for the last century. We went and had a look at the town hall, which was built just after 1900, I think. This is I'm using images that we used in our original presentation. This is the detail of the faience construction of the town hall. This is Taylor's music shop, a building that we found in the high street. It was clearly a town that had seen better days, that 100 years previously had been on the up. And so we showed pictures of these buildings, which we felt were optimistic. This is a music shop, and the musical instruments are carved into the stone on the facade. The laptop's getting ahead of me. The competition was in two phases. This is an image from our first submission, when you had to suggest an idea, your first reaction to the brief. And we made this model of a tower-like form with a very dense centre of stacked rooms, and the idea that you would be able to walk up a staircase through the building to the top, and at the top floor there'd be this tall gallery space with an outdoor terrace. That was where we started, with this gauze-like facade. God knows, we had no idea what that was going to be like, or any of it. And as you can see, the windows were very large. This is an early model of the idea that we brought to the interview for the competition. And we plonked it on top of the train set model that Peter Jenkinson had of the site, and said, "This is, if we're going to do this." And Peter still has this little model that you can hold in your hand. You can see that the building has become more tower-like, more figural. To us, it had this front face facing into the town, like the Statue of Liberty faces out into the Atlantic, and this more pronounced cut in it, which was almost as if something had been cut away at the top. So a kind of imperfect figure with these different floors represented by these different slices of wood, of different heights according to the different scales of spaces that the different programs of the building needed. A lot of the ideas of the project were in this block model. These are the boards that we made for the competition, the final versions. There you can see. So we proposed a new shape for the canal basin, which didn't exist then. We wanted a rectangular canal basin, and we rather optimistically suggested works of art in the canal. You can see we had fountains in the canal basin, and the building was placed on the end of the canal. And you can see in that drawing along the bottom, see this section here, the idea that the centre of Walsall is in a little valley, and at one end of the high street is St Matthew's Church, and at the other end of the high street would be the tower of the gallery. That was the idea of its verticality. And this is a sectional drawing that we made for the competition showing the different floor levels. You can see in the competition we had the temporary exhibition galleries, this taller galleries on the first floor, and the Garman Ryan galleries on the second and third floor, but Peter Jenkinson made us change that because he wanted the Garman Ryan galleries to be the first thing that you came to, which turned out really well. And we made this image of how we thought the collection should be shown, with these little pictures on the wall in a relatively small space, a wooden floor, a chair to give the drawing scale, and a window, in the idea that you'd look out at Walsall next to the pictures. And then also we proposed this facade where basically all the rooms of the house, of the building, would have these windows. The windows were all given a particular scale according to what the room requires. So you've got this weirdly diverse pattern organised in layers of tiles. And we use the analogy of a bird, the way in which a bird has this beautiful shape and this pattern of feathers, but if you take all the feathers away, the inside is totally different. So it had this kind of skin that the scale of the windows and the tiles would come together to make this surface, which was a weird idea, but we worked on it, and I think it's quite special. Another model. We were making a lot of models, as you can see. So this is trying to illustrate the idea of the way in which the figure of the tower stands at the end of the canal and the basin and faces towards the town, and the way in which it connects to the high street. And then this big model was about this high. And Adam did the drawings, and I made the model on my kitchen table out of plywood and timber, and the plywood was bending, and I had to use pots and pans to weigh it down while it was being glued. There was a sectional model showing the different scales of spaces of the gallery. You could turn the model around and see the facade, and see how the diversity of spaces was very unusual for a gallery, and we described it as being, as has been said several times already, being like a house, and that when you were in the gallery rooms, you felt as if you were in a domestic scale of gallery space that was right for the collection. And this is so now we have changed images from concept work when we were working on the competition to Helen Binet's images when the building was finished. I want to show you a few of those, and perhaps to talk a little bit about Helen Binet, who's a fabulous photographer who's worked with us across our whole career, really. Because when you talk about architecture, but or your own buildings, but you're not in the building, it's incredibly important to have good photographs. And with Helen Binet, her photographs are so beautifully composed, they're like paintings. In other words, the photograph has a power, a presence of its own, which is necessary, really, if you're going to try, and you need images that show more than just the information. They have to have their own quality, in order to convey something of the ambition of the architecture. And obviously this particular photograph is poignant because there's a beautiful painting by Lepine here looking down the canal, and we're looking down the canal. And a sky by Constable. Then it's getting ahead of me. Another image by Helen Binet, which is showing Richard Wentworth's witty striped payboard, which was about a very cheap way of rolling out the carpet for the public as they entered the site and went down the canal once. And this idea that came from Peter Jenkinson of seeing art immediately, so a window into the square where you would see art first. This is the commission that Catherine Yass made at the opening of the gallery, where she made these images of local people, and then into the gallery with the community gallery that Stephen has just talked about, so that you're seeing art well before you come into real gallery spaces. And I like this photograph because, and it was Louis Kahn who said that architects should really think about how do their buildings look at night, because when you look at buildings at night, you and the light inside is brighter than outside. You see the interior clearly, and you see the ceilings. And I've talked a little bit about ceilings, how much a ceiling contributes to the character of the space, how banal a white plaster ceiling with some tracks on normally looks. So I like this photograph because you're seeing up into a concrete ceiling, then a wooden ceiling, and you see the idea of the windows placed on the facade like pictures. That's really the idea of the building. I like this image of Helen's because it's about the, and you're looking at the gallery here from the railway station with these buildings around it, where it's sort of gathering them together a little bit like a church or a cathedral in a medieval town. But at the same time, the shape of the building is also a little bit imperfect, which is about it saying, I'm not perfect, and the building sort of putting its arm around all these other buildings and trying to gather it together into a group. And then these images by Helen, which I also find incredibly beautiful. And although they feel quite strange, do speak to things that we were interested in at the time, which was the magnificent landscape, let's say the ruined landscape of these former industrial areas of Walsall, with these decaying factories from the time when of the industrial period when Walsall was in its heyday, let's say. And you're looking here at the gallery facing into the town and the church in the distance, but then there are these buildings that are at that time were there was a lot of dereliction. And this image, finally, is also, I think, a very beautiful image. Of course, there's something wonderful about looking at the ruins of post-industrial parts of Britain. Nevertheless, it is a very beautiful photograph, and it is about the quality of the gallery in relation to these other buildings, like the beautiful factory on the left-hand side there with its fantastic gable end and arrangement of windows. The gallery was actually trying to relate to something of that magnificence, almost dumbness of those industrial buildings. And yet, it's difficult to really explain how we felt 30 years ago when we designed the building, or 25 years ago when it was finished. Because at that time, well, basically, we were very young, but there was also an optimism that the gallery would spark the regeneration that European money was going to bring into the town. There was so this image was about the idea of the gallery being the seed for something that was going to happen, or a rejuvenation. And of course, that magnificent metropolitan boulevard of housing that we were imagining along the canal has not materialized, and the Michelin star restaurant that we were imagining on the rooftop is not there. Nevertheless, lots of things have happened, and it's just so encouraging to see coming today the busy high street, all sorts of things that have happened along the canal, and that the building is still there as a kind of public-spirited gesture right in the middle of it. I wanted, if there's time, Matt, to speak for another 5 minutes. Yes? Because I was wondering how to actually finish this talk properly, because this was all, for me, 30 years ago. I wanted to say one or two things about what's different now, because everything has changed and you're a totally different generation. I wanted to say something about that. I suppose for our practice, we've been thinking a lot about how you respond as architects who are responsible for building buildings to the climate crisis, and the fact that construction contributes around the world to 30% of the consumption of the world's energy. How do you balance that concern with your activities as an architect? So, looking back on that period of the 90s and the early 2000s, when there was a lot of investment in new buildings, that's a period that has passed. Now the effort is in maintaining those buildings, in funding them, in running them. We've tried to switch our interest into the renovation of existing buildings. We're not entirely successful. We still have to do new buildings. But we're trying to concentrate our efforts in transformation. And I just wanted to show you this one project that we did with a firm from Belgium and two firms from Belgium, which is the transformation of an office building, a listed office building from 1970 in Brussels, a former insurance headquarters. And we're looking here at the photograph of the construction site, where they're taking the facade off, they're laying it down on the deck here, they are renovating the elements of the core 10 facade and the window frames, replacing the glazing and putting it back. In this image, the building is being stripped back, and we're cutting into what was formerly underground car parking, which of course is no longer wanted, to transform those underground spaces into, so this is a new cut, new columns, to make new habitable spaces. And here we're inside the building, cutting away a lift core and a staircase in order to make a new void in the centre of this very, very deep office building in order to make it work totally differently. This is the new space that we've made. So instead of it being an office building, it's now a health club, a hotel, co-working space, a food court, and some office space. And this new atrium space joins all of those entrances. You can see up in the ceiling, these columns are new. You can see the difference between the concrete that we've kept and, well, you probably can't, but where the ceiling is actually made of steel rather than concrete. So in other words, a very crafty repair and remaking. And that this is the finished building, which looks more or less like the original building, but of course it's changed in many ways. The glass is different because it's now triple glazed. The tint is lighter. There are lots of additional details to do with bringing the building up to current standards of safety. And this is to me and it's not the architecture that I would design now or ever thought I would design, and I haven't designed it. But nevertheless, I feel that I'm in conversation here with the architect René Stapels, who designed the building in 1970, who was thinking about the American architects in the 1960s who designed these corporate headquarters for the first time, who worked for Louis Kahn, Kahn being someone who loved Rome, ancient Rome, and drew inspiration for his architecture from these buildings. So I feel as if instead of inventing something new, it's a different conversation about being in conversation with lots of previous generations of architects, and that we should try now to do less new buildings. So, thank you.